Good afternoon. My name is Marjorie Brands, and this is the webinar on the Net Promoter Score, instant feedback at your fingertips. This is being hosted by the School for Social Entrepreneurs, Ontario, which, as the name would suggest, is a place for people who are starting new initiatives that address social and environmental concerns using the tools of business. Today, we will be hearing from Vince Schutt, who is an expert on Net Promoter Score. And Vince is from the organization Enviromentum. You'll be hearing more about him in a moment, but first I wanted to just, again, welcome you and to say that today we have a lot of participants who are coming from SSE's program called SELECT. And SELECT is a program called, it stands for Social Entrepreneurial Leaders Enabling Climate Transitions. That's quite a mouthful, but the SELECT program is really around helping communities select the futures that they want under climate change. So as we go through this call, you may hear a few references to SELECT. Just know that if you're from SELECT, wonderful, we're so glad to have you. And if you're not from SELECT, you are still very welcome here. And this is a general call, and you do not need to know anything about SELECT to be able to participate. If you're new to SSE, we hope that this will not be the first and last time that you join us. We do have workshops on a regular basis. If you go to our website, www.sseontario.org or www.the-sse.ca, you'll find our homepage. And if you see on the top left of the screen, there is a link for courses. If you click on that, you will find a listing of all the upcoming workshops, webinars, and fellowship programs. And then on the right-hand top of the screen, there is a link to get our newsletter. And the newsletter is by far the best way to be kept abreast of any sort of new big programs that we're running, such as our fellowships. So we love to hear from you and are so glad that you've joined us today. I would like to first go over some call logistics so that you know how to participate effectively. So if you are on your computer, you're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, all you need to do is to click on the audio link at the bottom left of your computer, and the dial information will be displayed when you hit join by phone. You will have an opportunity to ask questions during the Q&A by texting your questions in the chat box on the screen. And you may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, because I'll be collecting these questions and will address them Vince will address them during our Q&A. If you're on the telephone, your sound is on mute by default. But if you press *9 during the Q&A session, you'll be able to unmute yourself. Pressing *6 will resume the mute. So again, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute. And lastly, if you're wondering, we will be recording this call so that we can share it with everybody afterwards. This means that you can really just sit back and relax and not have to worry about taking a lot of notes. All right, well, so I would like to now turn to Vince Schutt, our presenter for today. So Vince is the co-founder of Enviromentum. And Enviromentum is an organization that promotes environmental change using evidence-based research and techniques. He has a bachelor's of science in nuclear engineering, which actually I learned quite interestingly that Vince used to work in a submarine, a nuclear submarine, and has the same job as Homer Simpson. So I think that's pretty cool. And if that's not enough, he also has an MBA with a concentration in consulting. Vince is a trainer in motivational interviewing and has conducted climate conversations with hundreds of young people. He provided skills training workshops for hundreds of environmental activators in the United States and Canada. His areas of expertise include root cause analysis, behavioral change science, human cognitive factors, sustainability, and evaluation. He's a board member of the American Psychological Association Division 34, Environmental Conservation and Population Psychology. And the best part of his bio is that he only liked short walks on the beach, as long walks would hurt his legs and make him late for dinner. So with that, I am going to turn Vince into the presenter for this call. And Vince, if you just want to take control of the screen, you should be able to share your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Marjorie. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are sharing our screen. Now I can just come over here to our PowerPoint and we can get started. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for coming today to learn about the Net Promoter Score. So really, when we look at this Net Promoter Score, we just see a very powerful feedback system. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, which is how do I gather data and evaluate new offerings and learn about whether these things are going to be successful or not, how can I change them, and really just doing a full sort of evaluation and exploration of this concept, this Net Promoter Score. So like many things that we're evaluating for the first time, our agenda today is really to use the major questions for any kind of inquiry that we're doing into a new concept. So we'll look at why would I want to use the Net Promoter Score? Who's currently using it? Who was the first user? Maybe there's who are users that are most like me? What is the Net Promoter Score actually? Like, what is the actual system, and how am I actually going to apply these numbers, these questions in such a way that's going to actually be something that I can use for testing out my offering that I'm providing to people. So let's talk a little bit about why Net Promoter Score. So what's valuable about this? So the first thing is that Net Promoter as a feedback mechanism is going to tell us who amongst our client group, after we've delivered our product or offering, whatever value proposition that we intend to be delivering, we're going to be able to assess whether people receiving that offering were satisfied, ambivalent, or dissatisfied. So that in and of itself is powerful, but when you combine it with the second bullet, it becomes even more powerful because we get to know the why behind that satisfaction, the why behind the ambivalence, and the why behind that dissatisfaction. So if we want to make a product iteration at some point in time, then we'll be able to say, well, this is the thing that made somebody feel satisfied. So those are the things that we want to make sure that we keep in the newest iteration of whatever offering that we're going to be delivering. Versus if we see the why behind the dissatisfaction, then it can maybe give us an inclination about maybe there's something about how we delivered this value to a client or a customer that really just didn't resonate exactly and meet their needs. So the third bullet here that we have is that the Net Promoter Score is a very, very rapid assessment. This is a 2-point question, literally a 1 to 10, and like a fill in the blank after. So you very well might be able to collect Net Promoter Score as a feedback stream on 100% of your clients, which really wouldn't be possible if you were to utilize maybe like a more in-depth or more complex survey tool. Lastly, the way that you evaluate this can actually tell you the likelihood of growth in this new offering that you want to evaluate. And we'll go into that a little bit more, but depending on how the results of the promoters and the people who are dissatisfied, when you evaluate this, and I'll show you how to evaluate it, that actually will correlate to growth or failure to grow with this new offering that is being provided. So if you want to figure out, is this offering going to be able to be scalable, then you would expect it to be a positive Net Promoter Score. We'll go into that more. So let's look at who is using the Net Promoter Score system. So, well, all of the world's major corporations. So if we look at the Fortune 500 companies of the world, 97% plus of these Fortune 500 companies are using the Net Promoter Score. So Apple, General Electric, Costco. So all of these big organizations are really using it. So who was the first user of that, and where did this really come from? The first user, so it scaled up incredibly quickly, was in 2004. Harvard Business Review released a paper called The One Number You Need to Grow. And this was an evaluation of enterprise rent-a-car that would immediately evaluate upon receipt of the car after the client had returned their vehicles, would ask, okay, well, how likely are you to recommend, so-and-so to a friend, which is what the Net Promoter Score system really asks. And what they found was that depending on how you evaluate this, enterprise rent-a-car was actually exceeding the many other brands of rent-a-car companies. And it was really the benefits that they were driving and how they were actually doing so well as a company was actually attributed to all of the learnings and feedback that they were gaining through the Net Promoter Score system. So we can see that it's useful in a corporate setting, but how do we utilize the Net Promoter Score system in a nonprofit setting or in a social justice application? We aren't Apple, we don't have $300 billion in the bank. So it's used by United Way, food banks, the Global Giving Network. And just to actually tell a bit of a story here about a nonprofit application of this, I read this story in doing my research for this presentation. There was a food bank that actually conducted the Net Promoter Score, and they were trying to get to the bottom of why the clients of the food bank were not gathering as much fresh produce as was expected. They were expecting more more gathering of this fresh produce. And through the Net Promoter Score and the feedback that was collected, this organization was able to realize that it was actually their policy that was preventing people from collecting this fresh produce, because at the time, people, like clients of the food bank, could only go once a month. So as a result, fresh produce was in this perception of it's only going to last like a week, maybe a week and a half, something like this. And they needed food that would be able to last for a month's worth of time, maybe even a little bit more, depending on when they were able to go the following month. So what they did was they actually had a policy change that allowed people to go more frequently than once a month to the food bank. And they saw a major uptake in clients of the food bank collecting fresh produce. And then this is going to lead to positive nutritional impacts for communities who need this food. So this is just a basic application of how you can collect that feedback and turn it into policy and ultimately meet your clients' needs better and become just ultimately more effective at what your objective and your mission is. So we talked about the why, we talked about the who, but what actually is Net Promoter Score system? How are we collecting this? So I'm figuring that probably most people on the call and everyone who's going to be listening at home later has probably taken one of these surveys before. So this first bullet is asking this question: how likely are you to recommend blank, whatever was in this quotes, to a friend? So I inserted Swiss Chalet's Festive Special, because of the holidays. So whatever offering, it could be a specific product, like a tangible product that you hold. It could be a workshop. It could be a value proposition that maybe might even seem intangible, but you're delivering it to somebody. You just insert whatever that value proposition is into these quotes, and then you ask this question. And you get a 1 to 10 output from it. And in a little bit, we'll go over what you do with that output. And then the next question is why. So on the first slide, we said that Net Promoter Score will provide you with, are people satisfied, dissatisfied, or are they ambivalent, somewhere in between? And then, so that's what that 1 to 10 is going to provide us with. And then there's this why, that's going to tell us, directly connecting the reason and cause for that feeling for each of those individuals. So how we actually do that is with this. So if you want to be able to do analysis, I'll bring out my Excel spreadsheet template later to kind of, that will be available for everyone. But in this original review of this scientific literature, this one number you need to grow, published by Harvard Business Review, it was a very unique way to evaluate this 1 to 10 measure. So when people are given a 1 to 10, we sometimes might look at a 6 as being like a good thing, because like, oh, okay, well, that's over half. And people want to be really nice. So even if they didn't have a good experience, then they might give us a 6. So then we might get like a feeling of like a false positive, like, oh, I did pretty good. I beat half. So what this taught us, this evaluation, was that somebody who is between a 1 to 6 is actually in this position known as a detractor. So this is somebody who is unlikely to use the service again, or like less likely than maybe like a normal customer. And potentially this person is even going to either not speak well of the service, or might even actively tell friends that this is a service that they wouldn't suggest that they use. So really, when we collect the Net Promoter Score, we're trying to learn about who are our detractors so that we can really understand in a more deep way what was problematic with their experience. So we can try to transition detractors up the scale to be in-betweeners or even promoters. So 1 to 6 is a detractor. Now this 9 to 10, this is a promoter. So this is somebody who's going to actively seek to purchase the good again, if that's appropriate. Or if it's more of like a one-time good, then maybe they, if you were to ask them to share this with their friends, then they might actually follow through with something like that. Maybe that would be a share on social media, a conversation that they might have. So the promoter is really what we're striving to gain. And then the 7 to 8, this is an in-between, or somebody who's not really very likely to be detracting, but not so motivated about the experience that they had that they're going to go out and try and sell this for us without even us paying them to do that. So ultimately, this feedback is going to help us to really try and drive as much of our client base to this 9 to 10 promoter paradigm. So what can the Net Promoter Score be used for? Well, it's going to reveal the individual attitudes for whatever offering that's in question. So it doesn't matter whether it's the Swiss Chalet Festive Special, or whether it's going to be this Net Promoter Score workshop. We could actually utilize a Net Promoter Score evaluation of this workshop. It might be a little bit jigged, because if somebody wrote a 6 and they're like, no, so you might actually be less likely to write a 6 on this workshop specifically as a result. So we're not doing that this time, but for any workshop that you do, it would be revealing the attitudes of how did somebody really experience that. It will also reveal the growth potential for your offerings. So there might be two potential potentialities that might really emerge as a result of that. So like, let's say it turned out that you had a large number of detractors and maybe not a much smaller number of promoters. So that might indicate that there's something problematic with the offering, and maybe you want to actually not pursue that exact strategy and instead pursue a different strategy. Or maybe this is an opportunity for you to find your motivation to really iterate on your offering and bring sort of like new feedback and new features to it, or offer it in a different way or with a different clientele. Change something about it that seems like it might actually work better and get a higher Net Promoter Score. Lastly, if name data is collected, then this is an opportunity for you to resolve an unmet need. So let's say you were to do a workshop and you have specific goals and objectives of what you're going to try to accomplish with that workshop. If you were to come back with a Net Promoter Score that was a little bit negative, maybe more detractors than promoters, then in this situation, if you very quickly collected that data, like right after, and you also had names of that data, then you would be able to then turn that around and try to reach out to those people and maybe try to shore up the expectation that they didn't meet after the fact, and try to turn somebody who might have otherwise been a detractor into a promoter with your initiative to solve their problems. So how do you collect this data? So there's a plethora of different free survey software available. So if that's like SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, any of these different types of free survey channels that are available, in most cases you can actually write up to about a 10-question survey, and that would be completely free. So since this is a 2-question and both of the questions are simple, not like complex constructions, most survey software would be able to do that. And you could also use print surveys. So on this slide here, I have how likely are you to recommend this workshop to a friend, 1 to 10 scale. And then why. So this will be shared with you after this workshop is done, this webinar. And so if you want to use this, you're actually being sent an editable version of this. So all you'd have to do is edit out the word workshop in each of these and put in whatever your offering is and print this out, therefore on a page, so it's very ecologically friendly that you're getting like extra miles out of your survey papers. Everything we do is ecologically friendly. Okay, so what is net about the Net Promoter Score? And so really the net comes from how you evaluate this information. So we talked about this 1 to 6 is detractor, this 9 to 10 is promoter, and this 7 to 8 is in betweener. So what is net about Net Promoter Score is the promoter over the detractor. So really we're looking for more promoters than detractors. So we're going to have some ratio that is probably going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 1.0. Okay, so if we had a 1.0, then that would mean, okay, well, if we have 10 people, then 5 are promoters and 5 are detractors, or maybe there's 4 promoters, 4 detractors, and 2 in-betweeners. So the in-betweeners wouldn't show up in this equation. So if we have less than 1 in this ratio, this Net Promoter Score, then that's going to indicate that a challenge is existing in the offering, project, product, whatever value that is being evaluated. There's a challenge there that needs to be addressed if this is going to be successful successful and grow. So then it would be a motivation to drive you to figure out what's going on with this and how can I fix it. Okay, so this is the second point, which is that less than 1 would indicate that this is not going to be correlated with growth. So a lot of effort to try and scale a new offering that had a negative promoter score might not be the best use for your time at this individual point. Instead, you might actually be better suited to improve your offering, get it to be a net positive promoter score greater than 1. And if you're able to build it up to be greater than 1, maybe that's when you'll be able to find the scalability. So the left-hand side, this less than 1, indicates these challenges, less likelihood for growth, and maybe not so scalable. And then the greater one being that strengths are actually present in the offering as it is, and that there might actually be scalability and an actual correlation with growth expectations for that offering. So from that, I'm just going to show you what we have set up for Excel. And am I still on screen share? Okay, yep, I'm getting the head nod from Marjorie. Okay, so what we have here is we have an Excel tool that's pre-programmed to collect your data in column B and ultimately to output different graphs and scores to basically do all the calculations for you. So I'm going to quickly go through what the different columns and cells of this Excel are so that you can see how to use this, and it'll also be available for the viewers at home later. So let's quickly run through this. So column A is just some unique user identifiers, so just whatever your counter of users are. So if you were to do a series of 10 workshops with 10 people, then you would just go down and reach 100 users. So if you have more users, then you can just use a fill function and drag this down, and you'll just get new users. In fact, I might even fill that before I sent this out to everybody. Then you actually insert whatever the score is, whatever that 1 to 10 score is for each user. So a 6, a 5, an 8, a 9, whatever those scores are. So I just took some random data and assigned it here. This column C is for your whys. So if you want to include the why question, then you can type in what are the whys of these different people. So you'll be able to have that referenced and available for you. And then columns D through H, these are all optional informational fields to help cultivate your memory. Maybe sort of like 6 months later, you want to like say, what was that situation where I was in when that Anna, she was a promoter and she liked something, but what was that again? So these are all going to be things to help you to just reflect back at a later point and have the information be more accessible for your usage later. So be that like maybe you collected the information at a specific event that you did, maybe there's a date or time involved, maybe if you did collect the name or any notes. So all of that is just to be a memory jog for you or just some extra context. Okay, so now let's look at coming over here, starting at column J. So this area is the data outputs area. So what I have highlighted now, this is just going to tell you your net promoter score at each of the different ranks. So we're allowed to choose between 1 to 10 in the net promoter score system. So this is going to evaluate your first 10,000 people. So you can see this just goes and goes and goes. So I extended this, so unless you have more than 10,000 people answer feedback, which, you know, come back to me later and I'll tell you how to change the formula. But this will just keep counting and keep chugging away. So right now in the test data, I had 0 people give a 1, 2, or 3. There's 2 people who gave a 4, 5 people who gave a 5, you know, and so on and so forth. So this is just your counts of how many people gave a specific answer. No, you don't actually have to look at it here if you don't want. You can actually see the exact same data here on this graph. So this is just a graph of this data here. So you can see a visual representation of how people are thinking about you, with the 1 to 6 being the detractors, the 7 to 8 being the in-betweeners, and the 9 to 10 being the promoters. Now this area is going to be from counts. Okay, so this is going to count the number of people that are 9 to 10. So those are going to be promoters. And the in-betweeners are going to be a count of the 7 and 8. So you can see this 4 plus 5 is 9. This 14, 10 plus 4 is 14. So you can see where these numbers are coming from. And if you want to see it in graphical format, you can see this graph here. So you can see that there is more promoters than detractors. So we're in a fairly good position here. And if we want to do even better, then we can try to turn more of these detractors into in-betweeners or promoters. If we want to evaluate, are we still in iteration stage, or do we want to grow with what we have? We think our product is ready for scale. The last thing that we have here is this net promoter score, this promoter detractor ratio. So this really is the net promoter score. So that's just taken this K17 divided by K15 in this system here. So it's just the promoters divided by the detractors, and that gives us 1.6. So if you were to plug 14 divided by 9 into a calculator, you'd get 1.6. And then if we looked at our PowerPoint, 1.6 is greater than 1. So we know that we're on the right-hand side of the net promoter score. So that's good news. And okay, so there's one other thing I want to show you on this spreadsheet, which is you may want to test out a new iteration of your product against previous iterations. So this sheet down here, this data library, that's going to give you, that's just going to be your storehouse where you keep all of your data. Okay, but let's say you want to test one version of your workshop against a different version. So here we have 32 users in a workshop, and maybe we had, this is like workshop 1, but then we start another thing and we say, okay, workshop 2. And maybe we actually chose to make some iterative changes, and we want to see how much better or potentially worse did we actually make our workshop worse. That's possible, hopefully not, but it's a possibility. So then we could record all of our data here in our data library. But that's just going to affect our overall net promoter score. If we want to see how did workshop 2 do in comparison to workshop 1, we can actually use the net promoter score to evaluate which one was potentially better. And that's what this second page down here is all about. I've included a description up here. I'm not going to read that now, but that's there to help you to utilize this. So what you'll do with this is you'll just post in, you'll copy in from the data library all of the data from, let's say, your first workshop. So Command-C or Control-C, and you just paste that in here. And then it's going to output the exact same information. Now, let's say you had a different set of data from your workshop 2. Then you go back to your data library and you highlight all the data from your second workshop, which I didn't plug that in here. And you paste that in here and you just jot down, well, what was workshop 1? What was my promoter detractor ratio on workshop 1? It was 1.6. So then you paste in your workshop 2 data and you see what was your promoter detractor ratio from workshop 2. And maybe it was 1.8. And you can say, actually, workshop 2 seems to have been better than workshop 1. The improvements that we made were effective and they improved the product or offering that we were making. So that's what this product iteration tool is for you, just so you have a place separate from your data library where you can just test things and then just dump them out every time you're done testing them. And that concludes sort of like the informational instructional portion. And now we can actually go to questions and maybe even take some time to evaluate this last bit, which is talking about how Net Promoter Score can be applied in each of your different works and what you guys are working on.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
I'm having some technical difficulties. My the mouse on the control computer isn't working right now, so I can't get back into the. I'm calling in on my phone just to make sure that that there's another way for me to connect with everyone. But can you handle questions for now? And I don't know if you're able to get control of the screen, because if I try, there is a way for me to fix this, but I have to shut down my computer and then I'll kill the call. So
okay, well, what I can do is I can just ask all the audience if you can use your chat function to ask questions, then I can take questions directly through chat. I don't know if I can take control of anything else, but I can view the chat.
Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to be troubleshooting in the background.
You betcha.
Okay.
So whatever, it'll probably take a second if people had questions to type them into the chat. So I wonder if there's a way for me to unmute people who are interested in asking a question. I don't have the same control view that that Marjorie has. So
I think people who are calling in on their computers can unmute themselves. I think it's just calling in with their phones. I might have to use the chat box for now, or if you can't figure out a way to unmute them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so if somebody wants to unmute themselves, they can ask their question in that way as well. What I can also do, and if you type, your question. Oh, well, thank you, Brian. What we could do, and if people are still typing questions, please continue. If people want to do a little bit of a conversation or just talk about how you're planning on, using Net Promoter Score, if you want to just talk a little bit about your offering or your whatever project you're working on, then maybe we can have a little bit of a conversation about applying Net Promoter Score and maybe getting into some nuanced concepts there. So I'm happy to just listen for a minute to anybody who wants to share about their work. The most effective, okay, so we have a question from Mara Lee, thank you for that. So the question is, what would you say is the most effective platform for designing and sending out surveys? Well, one, I would be interested to know like what your specific application is. And so I'm not actually sure whether this answer will answer your question or not. So maybe we can check back in with you to see if it met your need. In my experience, I like collecting the Net Promoter Score as immediately as possible. And if the delivery of your offering is in person, then I would actually suggest collecting that information in person. And specifically, like a lot of times you don't even need to ask for somebody's name. You might already have their name. So then you can just give them the 2 questions. They won't feel inhibited from answering the survey as honestly as they want if there's not a name area on the form. So I think that what would probably be the approach I would use is I would collect the information as rapidly as possible with just a paper form. So, and this is an environmentalist who is like, super sustainable guy. I just think the value of that information is much, much more valuable than the environmental impact of a quarter sheet of paper. Yeah, I am the host, and I'm not really overly familiar. Oh, I can't unmute people. Oh, so if somebody wants to be unmuted, then just poke me in chat, and I will I will unmute you.
Hi, Vince. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Who's this?
Okay, this is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Yes, so I'm just wondering, how do I access Net Promoter?
Can you help me understand the question better? When you say access, can you define for me a little bit more?
Yeah, so is there like a database, like see what you're using, the spreadsheet and so forth, is that already compiled somewhere where we can plug in our information, or do we do that ourselves?
So that spreadsheet that I made, and I can go back to share screen for a second. This spreadsheet was something that I just made specifically for the participants of this call. This is here that I made this for you. So you can see that the title is Net Promoter Score Excel template. This isn't something that's just like publicly available, although we're going to make it publicly available. And this is just so that way you don't have to be an Excel expert. And what I tried to do is I tried to highlight in yellow what you might be, where you insert things. So you insert things in columns B through H. You're focused on inserting in column B. So this is where you put your score in. So when we send this out to everybody, all of these scores that I've got here, these are all going to be deleted, and it's going to be ready for you to just go to town and plug in your Net Promoter Score right here in column B. And as soon as you do that, presto magic, you get all of your graphs and your score and everything that you need as an output from all of the formulas that I've plugged in. So this is yours. Marjorie will share it. Did that answer your question?
Yes, awesome. Thank you.
Yay. Well, I mean, I'm like an Excel guy. I just like, I took an MBA and they're just like, don't turn in a paper, turn in a PowerPoint or an Excel for like every single grade. So I'm like, I learned more about Excel than I ever planned to. So I might as well do something with all that. Yes, so can Net Promoter Score be used to evaluate a potential workshop before it's delivered? That's an interesting question. When I hear that question, what I think about is I sort of go to a place of sort of like this market validation question. So I'm not sure that I would actually use Net Promoter Score to accomplish what you're looking for there. What I think I would probably do is I might actually have conversations with people and ask them, you know, if you had something like this available to you, like a product or an offering or a workshop or something like that, how likely would you be to like be engaged by something like this? And then instead, like to try to avoid just getting like the false positive that leads you in the wrong direction, I might kind of also ask questions like, what would be your willingness to pay for like an offering like this? And then give them sort of like a certain number of like dollar amounts or something like that. Just because if they're not willing to put skin in the game, then that's where you'll be able to kind of like detect it. So if there is not like a willingness to pay for the service, then like maybe that might be an indication that there is like it might not be financially sustainable for you to deliver it. So I would look, Sanjin, more at a market validation type of question and not Net Promoter Score, not for that question, I would say. And if you have another follow-up question, then please feel free. I'm going to jump to the next question. A question received over email. How will this improve my ability to make and build contacts? And then, so we'll take the next question on email after that. So let's deal with this first question. So utilizing Net Promoter Score, I'm going to kind of reframe the question in my own mindset so you know where I'm approaching this from. So when I look at this question, I'm thinking about this as how can Net Promoter Score empower me to build my network and offer my service to more people? So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. So what I would say is, if you had, I'm going to go back to screen share for a second. So what I would definitely say is, I would say, pretty please use this spreadsheet and include the whys and include a lot of the information, these optional informational fields, especially this column G. So try to collect names. So either because you immediately connected it and you kind of wrote the name down on the paper as you collected it, or whatever. However you want to do it, maybe you put the name field on it because you don't want people to be perceiving you, whatever you think is appropriate. But then if you have the name and you know who your promoters are, if you want to figure out who are going to be your allies, those are going to be the people who are going to go to bat for you. Those are the people that you want in your network. So if you're looking at users 1 through 10, or sorry, 1 through 8 here, we know who the users are who are going to be our allies. They're not user 1, in this case, Vince. Oops. They're not user 2. They're not user 3. So our allies are going to be these people. When we want to spend our time networking, inviting them to a fundraising event, or inviting them, or we have a new iteration of our product that we want to test, or we have a new workshop that we want to bring to light. These people are the people we want to connect with, user 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that would be how I might use it as a networking tool, is I'd say, who are my promoters? Let me talk to them. They're going to be worth my time. Okay, and if you have a follow-up, then please feel free. Was somebody going to say something? Okay, I'm thinking not. Marjorie, I did see your lips moving, so if you were saying something to me, then I couldn't hear you. What I am going to do, I'll skip to the next question here. And yeah, please let me know if I didn't really answer your question properly, or you have a follow-up. So the next question is, how can I use the Net Promoter Score to improve environmental performance in multi-residential high-rise towers? Okay, I mean, environmental performance in high-rise towers is like really, really like big deal. So let's see. One way, I mean, when I let this sort of like ping pong and percolate in my brain, full disclosure here, I do have experience in engaging multi-residential high towers, and I'm actually a 3 hours ambassador with Toronto Solid Waste Management. So I'm actually like a volunteer for my building to engage them on waste questions and to improve waste diversion. So I'm actually directly looking at questions like this. So if I was specifically trying to build something and test it out using Net Promoter Score and then use that to engage my entire building, one of the things that comes to mind is maybe having like a brainstorm session with like a green team in my building, which I'm a member of, and developing sort of like a floor by floor strategy for how we're going to engage. So like maybe we have like, we're going to engage floor X, and maybe it's sort of like we invite everybody from the 3rd floor to come to like this special thing, and we make it specific to them so they feel like it's local, it's specifically targeting them, and we bring them out to whatever intervention or thing that we've planned. Then as they're leaving, we collect the Net Promoter Score to say, would you recommend this workshop to other people that you know in the building on other floors? So that would be how I would use it. And then I would look at that and I'd say, was it greater than 1? And I'd also look at the feedback to try and make some iterations. So I'd probably try to iterate for like the first 4 floors that I delivered that. And my goal would be to shoot for like maybe like a net promoter score of like 2 or higher. And once I was able to achieve that, then maybe I would set my mission and work with my green team to deliver that intervention on every single floor of my building in that sort of like version that had a net promoter score greater than 2. So like that's one idea that comes to my mind. And if you would like to connect with me, Marjorie can also, send out my mail. So if you want to like go into that in a deeper way, that's kind of like the bread and butter of Enviromentum, is figuring out how to motivate people for change. So happy to connect with you and a little bit more deeply on that. And that's kind of the mojo of the SELECT program as well, as how do we really cultivate communities, and multi-residential is definitely in that territory. I'm going to skip to the next question. If we implement Net Promoter Score feedback after every workshop we run, is there any risk that people start to become Net Promoter Score weary and the reliability of the tool declines over time? That's a really good question, and I'll be completely honest in this, in that I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know whether evaluative studies have looked at weariness. What I can say about weariness, I'm going to do a gut check on the question, but once again, like this, it's very important for me to say when I'm doing gut check versus science, because Enviromentum is a science and data-based organization. So you should also check this answer against your gut. When I think of survey weariness, I think about when do people just get tired of surveys? They're tired of it. They don't want to answer it anymore. So I think the thing that's most weird surveys is like the 20 question survey or the 30 question survey. Like this is when people just start writing answers down because they're just like, I don't have time for this. So I think that that's actually a strength of Net Promoter Score. I think its 2 question nature might be just sort of inherently resistant to survey weariness. But I think that that's a valuable question, and maybe what I can do is I can look back and see whether people have started to like desensitize against the scale, or if the scale has shifted. So I will take that as a lookup, and maybe I can jot that down or something. Survey weariness. Yeah, and so I just wanted to jot that down. So one last word on that. So I'll check that out. And what seems like to me would be the most likely occurrence from that happening would be, as more people know about it, does the scale shift? So I think that that's probably what I'm going to look out for. And if I find anything that's noteworthy, then I can share it with Marjorie, and maybe Marjorie can like send that out. That's a very good question. Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions? How are we doing on time, Marjorie?
You know what? We are at 2 o'clock. So we're just at the hour. We are scheduled to go as late as 2:30, but if people have had questions exhausted, then we certainly don't need to keep people longer than that.
Yeah, and if people do want to share any specifics around their projects, and maybe use some of that time for like a little mini consultation, then we're happy to do that since we do have the time. So if people want to do more questions or that, then let us know, and otherwise, then we can just say thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Floor is yours. And if you need, let me just remind you of the call logistics, just in case you have forgotten. So if you press *6, that will mute you. But if you press *9, that should allow you to raise your hand if you're on the telephone. And then obviously, if you're on computer, you can type your question into the chat function. And if you want to speak because your question is, longer than what you can put in chat, feel free to unmute yourself now. I see we have a question. Oh, it's just a statement. Thanks so much. Okay. Oh, well, I'll take that as a statement that Bryna's questions have been answered. And I'd love to just invite anybody else. And I'm while we're waiting for people to say something, if you can, put in your chat function how you think you might actually use this, or do you plan to use this? Okay, well, this is a very quiet bunch, but this is quite common. I find that on webinars, people who are normally quite chatty become very quiet on a webinar, and it's just I find webinars create some very odd social behavior in people. So not to say everybody on this call is odd. Let's see. I see. Okay, so I would use this with any workshop I offer. Well, I can say, at least for myself, Vince, I have learned what I've learned today is how simple this tool is and how powerful it is at the same time. And it's rare that you get something that powerful with something so easy. So that's the thing that I think is beautiful about it. And I would like to start revising how we do our feedback as well. And then here's a comment from Victoria. I think it's quite straightforward, and sometimes use NPS or a variation for most activities we do. Sometimes I do the simplified yes, maybe no, instead of the 1 to 10 when I'm not feeling like a perfectionist or data monger. Very good. Vince, how long have you been using the NPS?
Well, I actually learned about it when I was in my MBA program, and it actually goes back to the whole survey weariness thing. So in the educational program, there would always be like an army of students. They had to do sort of like for a marketing class, they'd have to do like market research on something. So there was always like tons of surveys being circulated by students. Like if you wanted to just answer surveys from like business school students, just go to a business school and like put up a sign saying, I'll answer your survey, and you'll just be mobbed. So what I found is like there were these situations where we had to do this work, and I was like, we would constantly be in this situation of writing surveys, and I was like, these surveys suck, because we get like feedback from them, and it's like we'd say the question was, well, how does this actually change what we're doing? And we would survey like 100 people, and we'd have like 20 questions, and as a result of that, none of our behaviors were changed. So it's like if the survey that you give doesn't empower any behavior change, then it's sort of like, well, then why are you giving it anyway? So that's what I like about Net Promoter Score, is it's very simple, and it really empowers you to make decisions. It's a decision-making tool, and it's also, a feedback tool. So instead of like spending, 5 hours writing a survey and then another 10 hours collecting a host of feedback, and then realizing after, half a week's worth of work that you actually accomplished nothing. It's like, I did that over and over in my MBA program, and I was like, we need a better way. And then I found it, and then I really haven't used other surveys since.
Okay, wonderful.
For the most part.
Just a comment from the floor, and then I have one last parting question. Marilee says, I find the NPS data input and analysis Excel tool to be very useful. Getting people to do the surveys can be the main struggle. I would be interested in more visual, less text-heavy surveys or apps that can be used in real time to gather feedback.
No, I'm not too familiar with apps. So since the goal largely is this concept of getting like as close to 100% participation as possible. That's why I just kind of go for like on paper, because when you're in person on paper, and of course this might not actually apply for your offering, you might not actually be able to do that. So this feedback might not apply. But if you are in person and you can actually hand somebody a piece of paper and they see that it's only 2 questions, the likelihood is very high that they're going to say, well, it's only 2 questions. I can spare that much time. So that would be sort of like my universal preference that I would direct people towards. But I mean, once again, that's my preference. Once we get into apps, now we're dealing with links. Now we have to worry about like what's the rate of opening for the email, or what's the rate of sort of download, or you know, are they going to actually open this link and follow through? So there's a lot of questions with follow through. So we'll automatically start at a percentage of participation that's going to be less than 100%.
Right.
So as far as the apps to use, I really don't know. I think that you should probably use the app that you know the best, that you feel most confident in being able to put forward to your audience. Your confidence will be the thing that probably pushes that more than anything else.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Vince. I mean, this has been illuminating. I hope that everyone on the call feels more empowered to be able to collect instant feedback at their fingertips now. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, this has been recorded and we will be sending it out. There have been a few technical issues, so I do apologize for that. We will try to fix some things on the back end here. And I will just remind you that we have our upcoming webinar on January 31st around the difference between influence versus authority and how you can make change when you don't have a big title. So that will be hosted by yours truly, me, Marjorie Brands. And I just want to say thank you again, Vince, and thank you to everybody on this call for making the commitment that you are to making the world better. And we are so glad to be part of your journey. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, I think well, Laura's still on the line. Laura, if you have any questions, you feel free to. You're not recorded anymore. If you want to say anything, you can, and if not, just listen to me and Vince chat in the background. Yeah, I'm sorry, Vince. I don't know what happened with the. I mean, I've been having some trouble with the mouse, and while it's never happened during a call, but now I realize, oh my God, it's actually quite dangerous because I couldn't control the screen anymore.
Well, you know what? You were able to give me back the unmute feature, which I didn't have to use, but I was able to access the chat, and then questions started coming in the chat, and you know, it wasn't like a flurry or anything like that. It was, you know, a rate that I could kind of go through without like losing things, because we had you know, a reasonable participation, but not like you know, 100 people. If there was 100 people and I was trying to manage the chat, I might be like, woohoo.
Yeah, that would be too much. That'd be too much. Well, every time we do the webinars, you know, there's always some little hole that we find, and like we found 2 holes on this one, which is when you copy from Eventbrite into the editor calendar. There's something went screwy with the link.
Yeah.
So I'll have to figure out why that happened, but we haven't had that problem before. And then of course with the mouse. So there's one other challenge here, and that is do you remember when we started the call, I said I was going to hit record?
Yes.
I did hit record, but it didn't seem to take, because I noticed like by the time I'd done my intro and you were starting, I was like looking where's the recording button, and it hadn't gone on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was just because, you know, again, my mouse is not working properly. So it didn't record the very beginning. We got like on your first slide where it had the agenda, I think.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of starts very abruptly. So one possibility is that you and I re-record the very beginning and it's like, 5 minutes of exposition. And then I can ask our videographer to paste the 2 videos together. I don't know if that's possible. I really don't know how that works. Otherwise, we have a not a technically flawless webinar, which I'm not sure, everybody on this call actually, except for one, was an internal person, meaning somebody that has a close relationship with SSE. So they're not going to care. But I don't know if I'd use it as like brand promotion. It's not brand promotion quality, I guess.
Okay, well, that's fine. It actually looks like we're recording right now.
Oh, it's funny because I actually turned it off, but yeah. Oh, it's because you are the host now, and so I can't actually turn it off. I did click it, but this is okay. In the recording, I'm able to restrict the playback to only the portions that we want. But I don't know how to. I don't know how to glue two videos together.
I mean, I kind of know how. Like, you can import it.
Wait, just one second. Can you stop recording this just because it's going to make the file really huge?